everything I wish I knew before migrating 50,000 lines of code to React server components. All right, Darius, take us home. React server components are a lot. We recently rethought our docs and rebranded Mux, and while we were at it, moved all of Mux.com and docs.mux.com over to server components. So believe me, I know. I also know that it's possible and not that scary and probably worth it. Okay, this is going to probably be a positive spin article on it all. Let me show you why by answering the following questions. Why do server components matter? What are they good for? What are they not good for? How do you use them? How do you incrementally adopt them? What kind of advanced patterns should you use to keep them under control? And by the end of this, you should have a pretty good idea of whether you should use React server components and how to use them effectively. So my guess, I really would love to hear from Mux. Besides for using React and only probably ever using React, did you ever use, explore, or try other things before landing on React server components? Because I have this whole theory, which is as you optimize locally, you keep feeling like it's getting better, but there is much, much better somewhere else. Just a thought. Hopefully they answer it right here. How did we get here? One great way to understand React server components is to understand what problem they're solving. So let's start there. Long ago, in the days of yore, we generated websites on servers using tech like PHP. This was great for fetching data by using secrets and doing CPU-heavy work on big computers so that the clients could just have a nice, light HTML page and personalized for them. Yeah, HTMX does that too. And it's new. All right. I think everybody gets this. This is pretty much standard. Then we started wondering, what if we wanted faster responses and more interactivity? Every time a user takes an action, do we really want to send cookies back to the server and make the server generate a whole new page? What if we made the client do that work instead? We can just send all the rendering code to the client as JavaScript. I remember those days. This is what we called client-side rendering. SUSR, or single-page applications, SPA, and was widely considered a bad move. Sure, it's simple, which is worth a lot. Remember the day, do you remember like 18 months ago when it was all about, if you're not doing this, you're just a dummy? And, there's still a lot of people that think it's the best way to go. I don't know about all this. Is it a bad move? I don't know if it's a bad move. Please tell me. So why does everyone suddenly hate server components? So there's like a whole thing. And even Guillermo says, SPAs were a zero interest rate phenomenon. The only difference is it did happen for like a decade. I was building SPAs in 2011. You know what I mean? I'm not too sure if that's like, this is 100% fact, Sure, it's simple, which is worth a lot. In fact, for a long time, the React team recommended it as the default approach to their tools Create React App, and frequently changing highly interactive pages like dashboards, it's probably enough. But what if you want a search engine to read your page, and that search engine doesn't execute JavaScript? What if you need to keep secrets on a server? What if your users' devices are low-powered or have poor connections? Why would you use React to begin with? That would be my question. All right, so you see all this stuff. Yeah. And client-side rendering, all clients are sent the JavaScript needed to render the whole website. Then they do all this stuff. Yep. So that's always really annoying. And then you get all your data via JavaScript, blah, 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 blah. This is where server-side rendering and static site generation came in. Tools like Next.js and Gatsby used SSR and SSG to generate the pages on the server and send them to the client as HTML and JavaScript. The best of both worlds. The client can immediately show that, dude, I remember when this took over at Netflix and people were like, we're rendering everything on the client and the server, and my goodness, was it such a pain in the ass. SSR, when it first came out and everybody was like, dude, remember hearing the term isomorphic? People be tossing that crap out all day. Isomorphic. Yeah, dude, there you go. Look at this. You knew it. You knew it. You knew it was coming. Isomorphic. It's an isomorphic website. Dude, it was just the worst. Okay? First off, when I played isomorphic, it meant like at a 45-degree angle, Diablo 4, Baldur's Gate. I was having that kind of, that's my understanding of the word isomorphic. And it kind of really, it was hard. You know what I mean? That's isometric. See, that's how stupid I am. Do you see that? Isotonic. Anyways, the best of both worlds. The client can easily shut up. I'm not even looking at chat. I'm not even gonna look at whatever I said. Just accept it. Accept all the stupid things I say. All right. Yep. Okay. So then search engines can read them. This is a real problem, though. I do agree that this became a real problem. All right. So there you go. So we do all this blah, 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 blah. This is actually quite good, but there's still a few problems. First, most SSG approaches send all the JavaScript used to generate the page to the client, where the client then runs it all again and marries the HTML with the JavaScript that just booted up. This marriage, by the way, is called hydration, a term you see a lot in this neck of the woods. Yep. Do we really need to send and run all the JavaScript? Well, you know, one really cool thing about using require over import is that you don't use all the JavaScript, but you do send it all. But sending, you know, I have some arguments about where your cost of sending is, and it probably isn't in the code you wrote, because most websites, the actual code you wrote is fairly small in comparison to the fact that you have Lodash, you have Ramda, you have React. You're also experimenting, so for whatever reason, you also have Svelte also in there just because you wanted to check it out. You also have LeftPad. You also have blah, 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 blah. You forgot to actually do uglification of your code, right? You have like all this crap inside your code, and you're like, why is this big? Do you really need to duplicate all the rendering work just to hydrate? Second, what if the server-side rendering takes a long time? Maybe it runs a lot of code. Maybe it's stuck waiting for a slow database call. Then the user's stuck waiting. Bummer. This is where React server components come in. What are React server components? What are they good for? Well, server components are, unsurprisingly, React that runs on the server instead of the client. The what isn't nearly as interesting as the why, though. Let's see, why do we want RSCs? Well, frameworks that support RSCs have two big advantages over SSR. First, frameworks that support RSCs give us a way to define where our code runs, what needs to run only on the server, like the good old PHP days. By the way, his previous argument of things taking a long time to render, I'm pretty sure your React server components are going to have the exact same problem here. And what should run on the client, like SSR. These are called server components and client components, respectively, because we can we can be explicit about where our code runs. We can send less JavaScript to the client. I'd really love to see some statistics here, right? This bundle sizing. I want to see bundle sizing. This is what I want to know is how much less JavaScript are you actually sending? Because the moment you need React, you're still sending React, right? That's what I'm curious. Are you actually saving code, or are you saving like 2K? Because you got to remember, it's also gzipped. It's not only is it minified, it's also gzipped. So your code that you contributed, does tree shaking help? Well, tree shaking obviously is a good thing, but tree shaking kind of is irrelevant in this discussion, right? Assuming all versions of your code are produced the same, meaning that tree shaking in both happen, and it only comes down to what you need versus the whole thing. So I'm just curious about this, right? There are definitely, I am curious. We can send less JavaScript to the client, leading to smaller bundle sizes. Okay. There you go. We have all this stuff right here. The second advantage of RFC-driven frameworks, server-side components can fetch data directly from within the component. That's actually, I think this could be a disadvantage as well. When the fetch is complete, server components can stream the data to the client. This new data fetching story changes things in two ways. First, fetching data in React is a way easier way to think about it. Any server components can just fetch data directly using a node library or using fetch function we all know and love. Your user component can fetch user data. Your movie component can fetch movie data, and so on and so forth. No more using a library or using useEffect. Yeah, useEffect is a pain in the ass, I get that, to manage complex loading states. React Query, I still love you. No more fetching a bunch of data at the page level with get server-side props, and then drilling it down to the component that needs it. Yeah, I mean, again, I think like whenever I read this, I feel like the whole problem here is that your data representation and your UI representation are trying to be one, which causes this whole problem down lower. But I'm not sure if this is a great way to solve it up high, because I think running into the n+1 query problem becomes really simple for you. Even if it's on the server and it's way, way faster, I think it's really easy to goof up and create an exceptionally chatty service. You know, I think it's easy to do that. And I think that for toy websites or websites that are simple, this is not a problem. But I think as you get to things like Netflix that require a lot of stuff, I think that can become exceptionally more difficult, right? When you have thousands of pieces of data that you have to have and you make components responsible, well, you have to be really careful about where does that responsibility lie. You have to keep on trying to drive it upwards, right? And that's the hard part. I think it's not as simple or as easy as people are making it here. Second, it solves the problem we talked about earlier. Slow database call, no need to wait. Just send that slow component to the client when it's ready. Your user can enjoy the rest of the site in the meantime. Being able to stream out each individual part, I think is really nice, right? I did like that. That's cool, right? That's super cool. I do like that. Can we all agree that that's really good? Right? You will get spinner hell, though, right? It's not like you're getting away from something. And so I have a personal belief, which is in-app spinners cost more than pre-app spinners. But again, my perspective comes from Netflix, which may not be the same thing because you go onto Netflix. A TV generally is how people watch Netflix. I mean, most comes from TV, right? You kind of have this experience of these loading screens and all that. So it's kind of pre-baked into the cake. And so personal opinion is that outside of app spinners or loading up spinners are less costly than in-app spinning. In-app spinning feels worse to me. Throbbers, as they're called. Netflix, by the way. Bonus round. What if you need to fetch data on the server and the user in response to a user's action on the client, like a form submission? We have a way to do that, too. The client can send data to the server, and the server can do the fetching or whatever and stream the response back to the client just like it streamed the initial data. This two-way communication isn't technically React server components. It's just React action, but it's built on the same foundation and is closely related. We're not talking about much about React actions here, though. Gotta save something for the next blog post. Let's see, what aren't React server components good for? Up until now, I've been painting a pretty rosy picture. If RSCs are so much better than CSR and SSR, why wouldn't you use them? I was wondering the same thing, and I learned the hard way. As the title of this post suggests, that there is indeed a catch. A few, actually. Here are 3 things that we spent most of the time on when migrating to React server components. Okay, cool. I'm glad that they're taking the time to also say the negative parts of things. For me, that's really important. CSS in JS is a non-starter. Well, that should have always been a non-starter. I firmly have been. I saw React style components or whatever they're called, style components, and within 14 seconds, I said, "This ain't it. This ain't the move, right? This ain't the move." Turns out that as of right now, CSS in JS doesn't work in server components. This one hurt. Moving from styled components to Tailwind CSS was probably the biggest part of our RSC conversion, although we thought it was worth the trouble. Yeah, that's fine. So if you went all in on CSS in JS, you've got some work to do. At least it's a great opportunity to migrate to something better, right? I always have a hard time, again, I'm happy that React is more opinionated. I just don't know if I like that opinion, but I get it. I mean, you already see me. I don't like JavaScript, CSS and JavaScript. I think it's horrible, but if someone uses it, that's their stupid choice, and they get to make that stupid choice, and they get to keep making that stupid choice. Everyone seems to love Tailwind. It's because Tailwind is just literally the reinvention of 2010 programming. Okay? That's all it is. It's 2010 programming. If you don't understand 2010 programming, you didn't do PHP with clear fix and float left and float right. Like, if you ever stacked 3 components together with something in the middle and you had to use floats and clear fixes, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because you had left, 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 clear fix. Like, that's just what it was. You wrote your code where all of your classes were these very, very, very simple named things that were just construction components. I need this thing to float left. I need to have a, margin 20. The only difference was it wasn't pre-processed. So you had you had 5 margins, right? You had margin tiny, small, medium, big, large, right? You had padding, tiny, small. You had you had this. You had PT, PS, PM, PL, and P like H for huge or something like that, right? You had that. You had that. And then you had every single one of those classes so that whenever you wrote a little component, all you did would be like, I want PM, MS, left, clear fix. Boom, right? Like, we literally did all of this 15 years ago. That's all Tailwind is just the reification plus a post processor where you can define your own little pixels, like 1/3, instead of just having your defined amounts. Okay? Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm just sorry. I'm just telling you a little bit about your past. Tailwind is nothing new. It is just a recreation of what was already there 1,000 times before. New stack, HTMX, Tailwind, PHP. No, my new stack right now, which I'm pretty excited about, is going to be, of course, HTMX, OCaml, Terso, Tailwind. The hot stack. Hot AF. It's hot. This shit's hot, okay? React context doesn't work in server components. You can access React context only in client components. If you want to share data between server components without using props, you'll probably have to use plain old or a use of plain old modules. I don't think I understand this because I know what a module is, but this must be something, they must be using the term module slightly different. Are they just saying use a database? Because sharing data would be actually like because you're not in the same V8 isolate, right? One V8 isolates on the server, the other V8 isolates on on your client. So not really sure what they mean by that. I'm confused. And here's the kicker. If you want some sort of data to be limited to a subtree of your React application, there's no great mechanism for doing that in React or in server components. If I'm wrong, please correct me. I really missed this. Our doc site, this was just wasn't too big of a problem. The places where we used React context heavily were also places where we were highly interactive and needed to be shipped to the client anyways. Our search engine experience, for example, shares state like query string and is open throughout the component tree. On our marketing site, though, this really got us. Our marketing site has areas that share a theme. For example, is the screenshot, let's see, in the screenshot below, each component in our pre-footer, it needs to understand that it is on a green background, so it knows to use the dark green border. Normally, that I would have reached for context to share the theme state. But since these are largely static components, that are ideal candidates for server components, context wasn't an option. Sure, we would have worked around this by leaning hard on CSS custom properties, which is probably better since the styling concern, not a data concern. But other developers may not be so lucky. Okay, fair. Curious about that. Sorry, my reading really went downhill just then. How's my thought stack? Am I crushing TJ yet? Am I going to beat TJ yet? Oh, I'm getting close to your TJ. TJ, I'm getting so close to you. TJ, I'm coming for you, TJ. Oh, no, I'm not even coming close to you, TJ. TJ, you've officially ratioed him and everything. Okay, you're the winner, TJ. You're the winner. What is LOC? Lines of code. Honestly, it's hard to keep everything in your head at once. Fundamentally, RSCs give you more flexibility about where your code runs and what your data fetching looks like. With flexibility comes complexity. No tool can completely paint over this complexity. So at some point, you're going to have to understand it and confront it and communicate it with other developers. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Every time a new developer picked up our code base, the question came up, what's running on the server? What's running on the client? Every PR had feedback regarding something accidentally unnecessary shipping to the client. I frequently added console logs to my code to see if the server or the client would be doing the logging. I don't even get me started on the complexity of caching. When you don't have a distinction between the client and the server, what else did you think was going to happen, right? Like, really, what else did you think was going to happen? This has gotten better with practice and with reliable patterns. That is not a good way to go about it. So let's talk about that. How do we use React server components? How do we suggest migrating incrementally? How do we do tricky things without creating an illegible hairball of spaghetti code? See, the fact that this is easy to do should be like, this really and truly should be the sign that something's gone wrong, right? That you have to develop patterns and you have to both have opinionated framework plus conventions. It just means there's more foot guns. That's all it means, which is dangerous. By the way, did Corgi do something? Corgi, you didn't have to do that, buddy. Thank you. Many appreciations. I'm a little worried about that. How do I use React server components? Yeah, let's see. You haven't been scared away yet? Think the pros outweigh the cons. Great. Let's dive into the basics. All right. So I don't think I need to do this part. I think you guys can do this part. This is an exercise for you. I'm not going to read this part because that's not the exciting part, I guess, for me. For me, it's what were the pros, what were the cons. I think that was a pretty good list of pros and cons. I think that there's a little bit of copium in all of this, which is like, I really like React. And so if you just use it just right, if you use React right, it's going to work out. Just like communism, Agile, and being a Scotsman, it's going to work out. You just have to do it right. It always worries me just a little bit in the sense that I don't want that. Right? I want something that even if you use it wrong, you're like, it's not that bad. It's still pretty okay. Like, you did it wrong, but, it still works out. You did good enough. And so that's kind of always been my kind of general desire to see out of something. Just because it is so easy to create spaghetti, right? Coding is an act of creating spaghetti and trying to not create spaghetti. Coding is an act of being handed noodles and not creating spaghetti, right? It's really, really, really hard. Oh, yeah, you can throw using Vim under this. Here comes the Scotsman. The Scotsmen are like, here's the problem. It's that they're not a true Scotsman. Let's see. Then what do you do with the noodles? You gotta make not spaghetti. Okay, that is your only goal. Spas were about competing with native apps, not with the multi-page apps. Here's an epic thread, by the way. There you go. You got an epic thread about the creation and competition of said things. Look at this. That is quite the epic thread. Right now, that's on the, no offense, Jay Larky, but that is currently on the old, I'm sorry or congratulations. Coding is just a function of reductionism. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, right? Got noodles, make ramen. There you go. Home is still the birdhouse. Lay the noodles in straight lines and snort them up your nose one at a time. That is how you code. But real talk, like, that's most my things is, like, here's a good example. I'm building something for work right now in which there's like this kind of complex application with React and all that kind of stuff. And I have to get a whole bunch of data, gigabytes worth of data from a service, and somehow put it into a UI without exploding both the server or the page, right? Very, very hard to do. And so what I'm doing right now is that I'm kind of streaming in these results. Well, the problem is in my like fake application, which I'm using React and Charts.js just to kind of get things set up, because that's what I usually do whenever I have to integrate with a large project. I first build just like a simple version of the thing without the large project because it's really easy, because then when I want to do it within, I know I just start abstracting out the points from one to the other. And so that's kind of what I'm doing right now. And so it's like, okay, I see what I've done wrong here. I'm going to pull out these things one at a time. Okay, everything's looking good. Now, how do I not destroy my memory? And so that's most of my time right now is just spent not creating, sorry, this page just crashed. And so even on my little toy project, it's hard. So when it goes into the real one, it's going to be super hard. So that's all I'm doing. I'm literally just taking spaghetti and trying not to make spaghetti, just so they can have something that works and is beautiful, and tighten it up and make it into a nice little bow, a nice little package where they instantiate like 2 classes, hand it a URL, and it just starts handing them out data that they can put into their charting software, which is not Chart.js. So we'll see how well it goes for now. I'm going to try not to use an array buffer, but we'll find out. The name is the array buffer again.